here today for the beef market update on RealAgriculture.com. We're with Ann Dunford from the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning, Sean.
And let's start off talking about the weather. Everybody's talking about the weather, whether you're a livestock producer, you're a farmer. The weather across Western Canada has been, in many ways, kind of extreme. In the southern parts of Western Canada, where a lot of the cattle are fed, what are some of the impacts or the effects that producers should be thinking about?
Well, first of all, again, like you mentioned right off the onset, two different impacts. If you're a cattle feeder in southern Alberta versus, say, a cow-calf operator in northwest part of this or northeast part of this province, completely different conditions to a year ago, and you're smiling. But if you are in southern Alberta, of course, cattle have been, well, certainly stressed with the mud and the rain and the wet, and gains are off, conversions are off, and of course we've got a cost to gain issue that's looking fairly significant to get these cattle to market. And the other thing that happens is, of course, with those kinds of production issues, weights are off, and so cattle take longer to get to market. And so we've kind of maybe pushed, I think, we've taken some of our supply from the spring. We aggressively sold cattle. If you remember, we were making some good money second quarter, aggressively sold cattle through there. Then come into this period where even though there seems to be some numbers around, it does look like we're going to stretch them out because the gains have been poor, and we're pushing some of these cattle back. If they were going to come in June, they might not come till August now, depending on how difficult conditions were in specific feedlots. So there's that issue, spreading cattle around. Flip side though, Sean, even though we think sometimes southern Alberta isn't everything, we've got a situation in the US where conditions in feedlots have been good from a feeding performance issue. Futures markets have been saying, especially to hedge cattle, sell the cattle aggressively. They're doing the opposite. They're pulling cattle forward. So from a North American perspective, not a really big impact, but locally, obviously it is. Again, if you're a cow-calf producer or grass operator, north of here, the grass is growing and you're smiling from ear to ear.
Yeah, now obviously there's an effect on the feed market and the feed supplies potentially. We've had a lot of rain in the Midwest. Obviously, Western Canada has had its fair share, so there definitely could be some impacts there. Let's jump back to, you had mentioned ranching. Obviously, we have an abundance of grass in a lot of areas outside of like the Peace, where they have been short of rain. But overall, we've got a lot of grass. Does that mean that some of those calves may come to market a little bit later than traditionally, or will people market probably in their traditional windows?
Sean, we tend to have a producer in this country that's pretty much set in his ways in a lot of cases. We're seeing in the U.S. a lot more interest in forward pricing calves off of the cow in the summertime, and to a certain degree that's happening here, but generally speaking the calves in most operations will come at a certain time. Granted, I think over the last few years we've seen a few more producers try different innovative ways in regards to whether retaining ownership or holding through the winter, but generally speaking a lot aren't set up to do that, and again those cattle come to town when they come to town. So I'm not sure if we're going to expect it drastically different. If there's a drought, obviously we move earlier, but if we've got lots of grass, do we move later? I'm not convinced that happens. Okay,
so what kind of impacts or effects is this strange weather? Is it going to have any local impacts going into fall? Are we going to see some changes in the fall?
Well, equity. Yeah. Equity's one right off the bat. But again, we saw cattle on feed reports over the last little while that kind of say we've got cattle into that late summer, that September, October time frame. That's how it looks today. Here we are at the end of June or third week of June. So many things can change. Now granted, we don't usually have major production issues in the feedlot through the summertime, and so we tend to be more on target and on track for our marketings as we go through the summertime versus winter or this kind of spring that we've just come through. But again, we've had issues. Feedlots in many areas have just stopped placing till they can get this mud cleaned up and out and the cattle gone, and so those kinds of issues. Is there going to be a pent-up demand for feeder cattle? Because they haven't placed very much here in Western Canada in the last few weeks. So is there some pent-up demand that shows up in feeder cattle pricing? Now granted, there's no feeder cattle moving either. Grass is growing and the markets are quiet. So this will be a good summer to get cleaned up, get caught up in the feedlot. But again, they haven't placed much. My speculation is the demand's going to be strong for feeder cattle to fill these pens. They haven't bought cattle in a while. And possibly, is there such thing as, again, kind of paying higher prices than what we'd maybe be anticipating and hope for a come in the market?
Right. So it would appear that we had some profitable wins early in the first quarter.
Second quarter.
Or the second quarter, sorry. Through the summer seems to be a bit of a sort of try to hold everything together and hopefully have some powder dry for the fall time and getting your corrals cleaned up. There's obviously lots of tag out there. There's lots of repairs that has to be done to a lot of the pens. And so it's really kind of a gearing up for fall, which could be a good fall based on what you're saying for the rancher.
You know, and again, we'll see. You mentioned earlier at the onset as well about the whole feed grain situation, and that one is honestly up in the air. We've had another StatsCan report out this morning, and obviously it was surveyed a while ago, so whatever it was, you try to deduct what did or didn't get planted or abandoned, or whatever the case might be since that survey was done. So nevertheless, we're looking at, you know, smaller barley crop, considerably smaller. What gets filled in with wheat, what gets filled in with other potential feed sources, unknown. Looks like a big corn crop, but again, we're hearing all the other stories on the ethanol side and China. So there are so many things going on this feed side that to sit here and say that we know what's going to happen this fall, I think would be pretty short-sighted. But we have a situation where you say, hold it together for the summer. That's pretty much a standard operating procedure. It does look like we're going to have a very competitive market, you know, fewer pen space or more pen space chasing fewer cattle. I suspect is going to be the storyline as we head into the fall. Good news for the rancher. I don't know about the cattle feeder. It's a margin business that's going to get kind of tight here.
Okay, and thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks.